Okay, in this video we're going to talk about graphing the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. And the first thing I want to talk about is going to be what the labels are going to be for the x-axis and the y-axis, because these are going to be different than all of the microeconomic models that we've graphed. Your label for your y-axis is not going to be price, it's not going to be a dollar sign, it's going to be price level, and so that's going to be super important. The reason why is because we're talking about the prices for all of the products in our economy, not just the price of jeans or hats or sneakers or one good. So it's going to be price level, and you can just write that, or you can write it out. If you forget a symbol, you can always just write the word out, but it is not going to be P, it's not going to be dollar sign. Again, we might not even be talking about an economy with the dollar, so we have to really be careful to avoid the dollar sign or even just P in general. We're going to use price level. Now the labels for the x-axis are going to be, there's a few different things we can do, but it's going to be a quantity. That's really what we're talking about. There's a few different things we can do. So the quantity of goods that we produce in our economy is going to be the real GDP. So you can write real GDP. Believe it or not, you can actually use Y. The reason why is because, and we had talked about this last unit, the amount of output in our economy is the same, the value of that is the same as the value of the money that we earn, our income. So you can use Y for income. So you can use real GDP, you can use Y, you can use real national output, which is what RNO stands for. You can also do national income. The ones that I use most often is I just use RGDP for real GDP. So that's the one that I'm going to use most often. And I want to quickly just sketch this on the side. What we're going to have, if we're in this long run equilibrium, we're going to have our price level, we're going to have our real GDP, and you have your long run aggregate supply, which is always going to be vertical. We have our short run aggregate supply, and we have our aggregate demand. And when all three lines cross in the same place, you've got your long run equilibrium. The graphs that I'm going to show you down below are going to be variations or deviations from our long run equilibrium. And the first one I want to show you is going to be an output gap or a recessionary gap. And so basically this is going to be a recession. So the first thing I want to do though is I want to complete this by filling in my labels. I'm going to have my long run aggregate supply. I'll have my short run aggregate supply, which is upward sloping, and I have my aggregate demand, which is always going to be downward sloping. Now, where the 2 points here, where the 2 lines here are going to cross our aggregate demand and our short run aggregate supply, that's going to be our short run equilibrium, and we've always got a short run equilibrium. So I'll make this label SR equilibrium. So currently, we are not in our long run equilibrium. If all of our lines crossed right here, just like we had up above, then we would be in that long run equilibrium. But we're currently not there. What we have now is an output that is less than our full employment output. So I'm going to have this as Y1, and I've got this underneath my long run aggregate supply. I'm going to have Y at full employment, so YFE for our full employment output. So we are operating at an output that is below our full employment output, which you can see here. And we are going to be at a price level that is below the full employment price level. And I've got that as PLFE. So we're currently below that price level. So we have some deflation here, and we are below our full employment output. So this distance, and I'm going to use the blue marker here to show this distance right here. That is what's called our output gap or a recessionary gap. So I'll label this here. Or output. You might see either one. That's going to be our recessionary or our output gap. And it's going to be a distance. It's going to be the full employment. Let me back up. It's going to be our full employment output, which I have as YFE, minus our current output. So that horizontal distance right here is going to be our output gap or our recessionary gap. So this graph is really showing us a recession. So if I were to say draw a recession, you would draw something just like this, where prices are going to be a little lower and our output's going to be a little lower. On the other side of this is going to be an inflationary gap, and that's going to be when prices are a little higher and our output is more than our full potential, or sorry, than our full employment output. And so I have this here, and I'm going to start with my labels. So I have my long run aggregate supply again, and my short run aggregate supply again, and my aggregate demand. I also have my full employment, YFE, my full employment output, and my full employment price level, which we might not even need to worry about right now, but let's say it's right here. But this is going to be our current, again, our short run equilibrium is here, and our current short run output is going to be there, and we've got this this horizontal distance between YFE and Y1. That's going to be our inflationary gap. So we've got a period of inflation here where prices are going to be higher and our output's going to be more. So these inflationary gap and these recessionary gaps, this is going to be in terms of output. How much more are we producing than we could, and how much less are we producing than we could? So in this case, it's going to be Y1 minus YFE. And I do want to just make a quick note of this, that our YFE, I'm able to do it on this side over here, this is going to equal our full employment output. Moving down below, what we've got is our first shift where we have aggregate demand shifting. So what I'm going to draw initially is our long run equilibrium, and I've got my long run aggregate supply curve. I have my aggregate demand curve, which is always going to be downward sloping to the right. And let's see if I can draw this such that I have my short run aggregate supply crossing both of those other two lines at the same place, and I do. So I've got my short run aggregate supply curve right there. If I have aggregate demand falling, then I'm entering a recession. So a recession is going to be a decrease in the aggregate demand. And so I have a new aggregate demand curve that has shifted to the left. I've got that here, and I'm going to call this AD1. So I have my initial full employment output again, YFE, and I have my current, my new output at Y1. My old price level, I'll call that PLFE again, and I've got my new price level, PL1. So recession is going to be a period where we have potentially decreasing prices, which we have here, and it's characterized by a decrease in our GDP, which we've got right here. We can show that from the original quantity of YFE now to this new one at Y1. This is mainly a decrease in aggregate demand. That's going to be what's going to cause this recession. There are some other things that might happen here, and usually prices can fall, but it doesn't necessarily mean all the time. And I really want to just highlight these few right here. Prices might not fall as quickly or as much as you might expect, especially as the model suggests by just having the price levels fall so easily right here. But there are contracts, there are fear price wars. It's harder to change things in terms of our menu costs and changing the prices of things. And there's minimum wage too. There are rules against lowering our wages as much as we might want to or might like to. On the flip side, if we have something called demand pull inflation where we have aggregate demand increasing, I'll draw this out first where we have our long run aggregate supply, our aggregate demand, and then see if I can draw this correctly, our short run aggregate supply. In this case, we're going to have an increase in the aggregate demand. So I'm going to draw my new aggregate demand curve to the right. Either consumption has increased, government spending has increased, investment spending has increased, or we're exporting more. And so I have this original output, our original price levels, and I've got a new greater output now. This new short run equilibrium is going to be even more, Y1, and I'll call it PL1. So in this case, this part's characterized by more output and and higher price levels, which I've got right here. And that's going to be something where we have inflation. Now, one of the things we haven't yet talked about is that there's two types of inflation. The first being demand pull inflation. And this is going to be with an increase in aggregate demand, which I've shown here. What's going to happen is output's going to increase and price levels are going to increase. And then in the long run, price levels are going to increase, the output will return, and that's something we're going to get to in a few lessons. But demand pull inflation is going to be caused by an increase in aggregate demand, an increase in spending. People might have more income or more wealth, and they're more willing to spend, which can pull up price levels because of the prices of all of these goods. We'll continue some of these scenarios in the next video.